when you find that you get a very limited amount of money from your administration, you have to figure out ways to make that work. And I found out several years ago that, well, many years ago, I guess, that textbook funds were available to all teachers. And, I didn't really think about the music that I purchased for the band as being a textbook. I didn't really think about, warm-up books or things like that as being textbooks. But then as I began to think about it, I thought, well, why aren't they? I mean, those are the things that we use, the resources that we use to help our students to learn.
Ask anyway, right? Find the right language to ask in a way that's sensitive to your audience, but have those things out there and have different ways for people to help. Because I'll also say this, when somebody helps 1 year, they are more likely to help in year 2 or year 3 or year 4.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Hinton, the beast of the marching arts. And listen, everybody, we're going to find you some money. We are finding you money for your band program in ways that you never expected. The smart people that are here to help us with that today, Paul Richardson. How are you, Paul?
Any day I get to talk with you, Tim, is a good day. Let's do it.
That's so very nice. And Gary Rupert is here. Gary, how are you?
I'm well, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you guys are here representing Leaders Creating Leaders, which is a wonderful organization that's helping a lot of people with mentoring and all kinds of ways of making music educators more successful out there. So everybody check out leaderscreating.com for all that they're doing. Paul, you helped me create the Paying for Drum Corps course that has been really, really successful in helping a lot of drum corps people pay for their dues. So everybody go to payingfordrumcorps.com to find that. And Paul, you're sort of a guru around the world of finances and helping programs make money, right?
It feels like I've headed that way. Yeah, I've got a lot of experience. Ran a WGI group for 15 years, Gateway Percussion, and a lot of experience in the corporate world with finance and technology, and find myself doing some consulting for different businesses and on the board of directors of a few, and just really enjoy talking about the financial aspect of the band world, which is kind of a taboo subject. So
yeah, not a lot of people want to talk about that, but we are happy that you are here to talk about it. And Gary, of course, you were a band director at a really high level for many, many years. So you're here to sort of give that perspective.
Yeah, I was a band director for 40 years. And one of the things that you learn in being a band director is how to find funds, because you don't ever get enough.
Absolutely. So we're going to solve that problem, everybody. Paul has given us the really great title, Finding Change in the Couch Cushions, places you might not have looked for band funding. So Paul, what's the first one? Where is your best idea for people to start? Idea?
Yeah. So the first place is actually not an idea, but it's just taking a look at your program and realizing that all money is money from wherever it comes from is the same money in your program. I know that's a weird way of saying that, but to elaborate, we're going to talk about a bunch of different places where you can find funding and things that are earmarked for, maybe certain kinds of spends. What that does is that allows you to use the general money for your program in other places. So the first part, I always say the first part of looking for money is looking at your program and seeing if there's non-monetary ways to solve problems. So I always want to start with the money conversation with, let's make sure everything else in your program is as tight as you can, that you've got the right people on board, because a lot of times we try to go to money to solve problems when in fact there's a non-monetary way to solve it, right? Maybe that's some different relationships within your administration, some partnering you can do in other places. Maybe that's finding the right personality for a band booster program that can help you solve some logistical challenges in ways where you don't have to spend that money. So anytime I'm working with a band director on their band program about money, we always kind of do a little bit of a checkup there. Obviously, in this format, we can't really do that, but I would be remiss if I didn't start off by saying, while money is a universal problem solver, let's make sure we're not going to that first. A lot of times we think we need lots of money for our program, and when we really look under the hood, there's a lot of places where you don't actually need as much money as you think you do. And that helps take some of the pressure off of this topic, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. Gary, I mean, you know how that is. If you're being smart about how you're using all your resources, maybe you don't have to raise quite so much.
Yeah, and a lot of it is perhaps not the money, as Paul says, but our inability to manage the situation in a way that minimizes that need. If we can do that, then it takes away, having to use money that we need for something else.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love it. Okay, Paul. So thanks for laying that out. That made a lot of sense to explain that. Now, where do we go?
All right. Okay. Now we let's just roll right into some different places, right? And the goal here is, no matter where you are in your program, right? If you're a new band director or at a new school, or if you've been doing this for a while, the goal here is that hopefully you're going to find something in here useful. Maybe a place that you're not already looking. Maybe there's another couch cushion that's got a couple of quarters in there. All right. Very first one. So if you are in a situation where you are in a Title I school, most Title I programs have money earmarked specifically for the arts. So this is really a matter of having the right conversation with the right people. And Gary, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that. I know you've done a lot of work with programs in Title I situations.
Yeah, it's actually Title I Part A that earmarks the money for the arts, specifically for the arts. The catch-22 here, though, is that typically the people who assign that money for the school system aren't in your building. And, they may be at the board level or at least at the administrative level where you don't get an opportunity to speak with them. So most band directors don't even know that money's available, but it is there. You have to be able to do two things. One, you have to be able to show that it is advancing the student achievement in terms of what you're asking for, the use of that money. And the second thing is that it's really helpful if you can get on the school improvement plan. Every school system has one at some level. I know at the last high school I taught, I made it a point to get on the school improvement committee so that as they had those conversations as to what are we looking to do in the school, there was a voice there that could talk about the need for the arts. And then I could have that conversation with the people who were putting out money. So it is there, but you have to meet those two things. You have to get it on the school improvement plan, right? And you have to be able to show that it is significant in helping student achievement. That's the key. If you can go in and you have a plan laid out that says, I need these funds for this purpose. Here's how that's going to impact student achievement. And here's how I'm going to know that it has impacted student achievement. You have a much better chance of getting that money. If not, that money's going someplace else in the Title I framework. If you don't ask, it's not coming to you.
Yeah, I love it. So that's a really great suggestion to start with. And you laid it out exactly to understand how to do it. I love it. What's next?
So the last thing Gary said is going to be a theme on all of the rest of these, which is you've got to ask, you've got to know when to ask, you've got to know who to ask, and we're hoping to arm you with the right questions to ask. So I think Gary did a great job right there and said all the right keywords. Part of this is also getting to the right people inside of your school system, your district system, whatever that is. So a lot of this is coming back to relationship building as well, which I have found most directors I've worked with are a lot better at relationship building than they are budgeting, or at least a lot more comfortable with it. So hopefully we're playing to a lot of your strengths. And if it's not your particular strength, again, look around and see if you've got somebody else, a friend in the program, somebody else in the arts department that is good at that can maybe help you navigate and get to the right people. All right, next one up, textbook funds, right? So band programs don't typically have textbooks. Music appreciation, so music theory classes do, but can that be written in certain circumstances for your music library, right? Those are written materials. They fall under, they can fall under textbooks. Your band books for your students, if they're not responsible for supplying those, let's make sure that that's not coming out of band budget. Let's make sure that we're using the same funds that that a math teacher would use for a textbook. I know a lot of things are digital now, and the textbook funds look a little different. But yeah, let's make sure that we're earmarking that money the way that we need to from the school, because again, if you don't ask, a lot of administrators may assume, well, there's no books in music; it's just instruments in a classroom, and that's not true.
Yeah, I think the key to that is it's going to sound like I'm manipulating the system, and in fact, I was manipulating the system. When when you find that you get a very limited amount of money from your administration, you have to figure out ways to make that work. And I found out several years ago that, well, many years ago, I guess, that textbook funds were available to all teachers. And, I didn't really think about the music that I purchased for the band as being a textbook. I didn't really think about, warm-up books or things like that as being textbooks. But then as I began to think about it, I thought, well, why aren't they? I mean, those are the things that we use, the resources that we use to help our students to learn. And so I approached the administration and I said, I understand there are textbook funds available. Why are we not getting them? And the response was, well, you guys don't have textbooks. Oh, on the contrary, we don't have formal textbooks, but we do purchase music, and we do purchase, warm-up books or, chorale books, those kinds of things that our students use. And I said, those would fall into that category. And lo and behold, the administrator said, you know what, I guess you're right. And so I started getting textbook funds every year, just like every other academic teacher. And so it is learning how to recognize what's going on in the system and how you can use that to your benefit.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in and weigh in here and just say that as a show designer and music arranger, there is more than one client that I have that I invoice them as their textbooks, their curriculum, and they tell me the language to use, but they go to their administration and say, we're going to be working on this music as part of our curriculum for my class during the entire fall season. And so they can use those funds to help pay for my work in arranging music, creating a show. You just have to ask, and then you need to find out what's the language.
Yep.
Well, Tim, that's great. Show design is curriculum design.
It is for the fall marching season for sure. And you just have to explain this. You have to, like Gary, like you said, you have to go in and explain to people, this is our curriculum for the fall season. This is music and designed work for us that we're going to be working on in my class.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Tim. You have to learn to be your own advocate. And principals have really difficult jobs. And if a principal's ever watching this, they need to recognize that I'm not making any kind of comments about them negatively. They have a really difficult job, and they're trying to cover lots of bases. So I understand that as an educator, it's not only my responsibility to educate my students, but it's also my responsibility to educate the parents and educate the administration because they don't know. And that's not a negative, that's just an is. So anytime any of these issues came up, it was a matter of me being wise enough to approach those people and educate them in a way that I could get them to understand the need. One of the things that I found was very important when I did that was always making sure that as I projected my need, I also projected that I didn't want to be taking away from some other purpose in the school. I didn't want to get money at the expense of somebody else. I wanted to get the money that was allocated to my students. That was really important because if you just go in and you just start saying, hey, I want this kind of money and I want it for this, and you're not open to how that impacts the rest of the school, you are less likely to get that. So if you're wise about it, then you go in and say, here's my needs, here's how I can show my needs, here's how I'm going to assess how that's benefited my students, and I don't want to take that away from anybody else. Here's how I see we can do that. Then I think we have a much better chance of getting that money.
I'm just going to say everything you said, Gary, is absolutely spot on. And there's almost like what I think of as a whole class of ways to get, normal educational funds that a lot of people don't think of that apply to band in ways that they do. And we could go through probably 10 more examples. I just want to give one more that's kind of just to show kind of an extreme example that I've heard of actually working, which is, somebody was able to use furniture funding. There was a bond issue that was paying for furniture, and they somehow, found a way to justify working with admin percussion equipment as furniture, right? Because it was staying in the classroom. It was, and again, that feels like a bit of a stretch, but that actually worked, right? And so I think the whole point of this is getting to the right people, whether that's a principal, whether that's somebody at the district level, And a lot of times there's an admin whose job it is to know all of these codes in and out and put them somewhere. So if you can find that person, you can potentially just go to them and say, hey, can we get creative? And can I describe to you the things that I need? And do you think there's a code in the system here that could fit in the right budget line item to help out, right? And so having that conversation can net you just thousands of dollars for your program that maybe you're not even thinking about.
Yeah, I use that same idea for materials of instruction, which is another fund that we get in our schools, MOIs. And my argument was, we had a meeting and they were talking about textbooks for another class. And my argument was, well, if they need them, we get them. There's no discussion here. But I said, let's understand something. And I asked the cost of the textbooks. And they told me, and I said, if I buy one sousaphone or one tuba for my band based on normal MOI monies, I can't buy anything for like the next 10 years. And they were like, well, that's not a material of instruction. And I said, well, yeah, it is, because I'm supplying that. If the student had their own instrument, I'm not supplying that. But we're, as a school, we're supplying that instrument. That's part of the materials that they need, the resources that they need for instruction. And so the next year, guess what? I got a new tuba. And, again, it's a matter of understanding, like Tim said, the language that needs to be used and how you can get what your needs are to fit into that, that really, makes the thing work.
Yeah. And Paul, I hope you don't mind if I jump ahead to something else that's on your list. But you mentioned on here that principals have discretionary funds. And I feel like this is in the same vein of what we're talking about. You don't know if it's there until you ask. And don't be afraid, if you're a band director, to go in and talk to your administrator or your school secretary or your budget pro, whoever, and say, like Gary, like you said, let's get creative. What is there? I need help. Because I got to tell you guys, I cannot tell you how many times this has happened. And I'm just going to describe this scenario. Somebody hires me to create their show, and they're trying to create a splash. They're trying to take their program to the next level. They're finding funds, and they're making, and they can sell the administration, the principal, everybody on this. Okay, we're bringing in this national level guy. He's going to create a show for us. It's going to help us get to the next level. Here's what the students are going to get. Here's what the school's going to get. People are going to be talking about us. They go through that whole program, and then so many times the principal will go, well, I have a discretionary fund. I'm going to give you $5,000 to help you make that happen. This has happened multiple times. Or they hire me, and then the band director, I encourage the band director to go to your principal and say, we need an extra $6,000 to do this special show because we need to buy these costumes and flags and blah, blah, blah. So many times the principal says, I've got money for that. I'm going to support that because this is good for us. It's good for the school. It's good for the school image. It's good for your kids. So, Paul, I know you can speak to this. Principals have pools of money at their discretion, but you have to ask and you have to make your case.
Yes. And the great thing about this is that band programs have something that kind of no other department has. And that is, we have a product that can really add to the environment and the culture of the school, right? So I'm talking about playing the assemblies. I'm talking about all of those, hey, it'd be great if the band could do this gigs, right? And let's be real, all of those do have some kind of cost, right? A lot of times it's not monetary cost, but maybe it's a cost of pulling your students out. Maybe you're sacrificing some rehearsal to get them there, right? Maybe the cost is that your students are staying after school for something. And it's totally okay to, use that as, I want to say kind of social capital in those circumstances. So if you are the band director that is always saying yes to that, and your band is showing up, and you're doing the extra basketball game that the coach asked for, right? It's really, really easy for a principal to allocate those discretionary funds to a program that they see as adding so much to the school, because we are adding so much to the school, right? Bands, typically in high school, band is the largest extracurricular activity in any school that's, out of everything, right? There's more kids in band typically than the basketball team. There's more kids in band usually than the football team. So
yeah, Gary, we're the ambassadors for the school, right?
Yes.
We're the face of the school on a lot of occasions.
For sure. And it's important too that we remind everybody to be smart about what they're doing when they're asking these questions. We worked at LCL. We worked with a young teacher who had some budgetary issues. In fact, Tim, you're aware of this actually. And first of all, the person didn't have a budget. And then when we told them to create a budget, they were at a Title I school and they created a $60,000 budget. And there's no administrator that's going to look at that and say, oh, yeah, okay, let's do this. And so we met with the supervisor of the arts. We met with the principal and we met with the teacher. And I had asked the teacher to whittle it down and get, let's talk about the things you absolutely need to have. Then they came back with a $30,000 budget, which was still too large. And so then when we met with all of the parties, all the stakeholders, we whittled it down to 10. But the teacher was doing things like, well, they had a small band. They wanted a PA system for marching band to be able to make their band sound better. And my brain is saying, no, that's just going to make them sound louder. You got to teach them how to play to make them better. But anyway, they were asking for like a $20,000 PA system. And the supervisor says, you know what, I'll get you a PA system that is adequate. It's not going to be that one, but I will get you one. Right. And then the principal jumped in and he offered $6,000 of the $10,000 budget that we had whittled it down to ultimately. And so there was really almost nothing that this teacher had to get on their own because we had those conversations. But had we not had those conversations, none of that's happening. First we didn't have a budget, then it was too large.
Yeah, and I'm even going to jump in. I feel like I'm taking as far afield from maybe where you were planning, but I'm going to jump in and say this. I have worked with many programs. I guess I've been doing this a long time. I've been through a lot of scenarios, everybody, so bear with me. But I've multiple times somebody needed that PA, that miking system, right? The amplification system for their marching band. You know what it turned out to be? They got one for the school, and the theater people used it, and the chorus people used it, and the orchestra people used it, and they used it at basketball games. And all of a sudden, the system that they needed for the fall became a system that everybody used. Everybody chipped in. Money was found for the front office. Boom. It's lots of ways. You have to be creative, and you have to find out who are your team members from without all around the school that you can bring in to help you make these things happen.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and the backstory to that I don't know of is the skill is you have to be unafraid to put your needs out there, right? And shop that around and just say, hey, I'm really trying to do this, and talk about that with other faculty, right? Talk about that in a non-complaining way, right? It's not like, oh, the school doesn't support me. We need this, we can't get it. No, that doesn't get you anywhere. Say, hey, man, we've got a great opportunity, but I really need this to get it done, and have those conversations with whoever. I don't say whoever will listen. You don't want to be super annoying with it, but just other people who may have joint stakes. Yeah, that's fantastic. But it definitely requires, if you've got any hangups about asking for help or making the needs known, letting go of those could be really, really beneficial to your program. I'm going to spin this even a slightly different way. We're talking about all of the different benefits that the programs can have and the performances and things like that. Bands get asked to do community performances all the time, right? Maybe there's a local parade. Maybe there's, an opening for this or that or whatever it is. And always ask for compensation for those, because a lot of times there's no budget for it and there's no money there, and you have to decide whether you want to do that. But compensation doesn't always come from money. I have seen band programs, if you've got some kind of fundraiser, if you've got a page where people can go to donate, asking whatever businesses is, whatever community event to publicize that can sometimes net you thousands of dollars of donations. Sometimes it can net you in-kind donations. Maybe there is, maybe it's a community performance for an organization that has their own board of directors. And on that board of directors is, this is a crazy one that actually happened. On the board of directors for that organization is somebody who owns a car dealership. I actually saw a band spin up a fundraiser to win a brand new Mustang because of relationships that they built out of a community performance. And that turned into, as you can imagine, a massive raffle. And they actually, made 5 figures on that. But that all happened because band was asked to do a community event. band director said, hey, we would love to be here, but there's some costs. Can you help us cover these costs? And that conversation morphed into something much, much bigger. So again, just in the vein of asking, even if it's something the band has done, year over year over year over year, feel free just to mention, hey, there are costs associated with this to whoever's organizing those events. You never know what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Paul and I actually talked about this last week, where communities always ask us to do things, and they don't understand that for me to bus my students to wherever it is that they need to go to be able to participate in this event is not a part of my budget. And so that money has to come from somewhere. Either I have to raise it or I have to get them to donate the money to bring us. And once you mention that to them, more often than not, they find a way to come up with the money to get you there.
Or at least they feel there's some obligation, right? And they find a way to do that. I'll also say this: if you're asked to do a community event, and it's one where there's going to be some costs, feel free to, if you've got a relationship with administrators, feel free to let your principal know that that's what you're doing, because this may be something where the principal is it's very important to them to have school presence there, and they understand those costs. So again, another way just to leverage the product that we have, because that's one of the advantages of being in band as opposed to teachers in other departments. Math department doesn't quite have the ability to trot out a product that is enjoyable for most people. Sorry to all the mathletes out there. I was one. I love you guys, but it's true.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, you might think creatively here too. Like, I one time was on the news marching around playing the fight song on National Pizza Day in a pizza restaurant, right? And so, like, there's all kinds of ways that you might be making an appearance. But you know what? That restaurant where you're making an appearance to help them out, they might not be able to make a donation to the band, but you know what? They might throw you 100 hot dog buns for your next whatever. So there's all kinds of ways that people can reciprocate and pay. And I know, Paul, you have more to say about that. Maybe not.
No, I was caught up on hot dog buns, right?
Sorry. We all started waxing poetic about hot dogs, everybody. So anyway, by the way, I want to mention, you were talking about using the school, and we're talking about finding all the resources in the school. You can also figure out, if you're trying to solve a problem, here's something I need. I would say think about who else in the school could this involve? I know people that get their props painted by the art department or the art club or whatever. So you just have to think creatively about the school.
It's good that you said that. At one point, I wanted to do Robert W. Smith's Africa piece, but I wanted it to be bigger than just us playing the piece on stage. So I went to the creative writing class, and I asked the teacher in the creative writing class to have their students write a storyline to the piece of music, have them listen to the piece of music, create a storyline, and then we would pick the best storyline. And then I went to the drama department, and I asked the drama department to act it out as we played it at the concert, involving all of these different groups. Actually, we went to the art department, and they created tribal masks. So we involved 4 different departments in order to participate in this thing, and ended up getting money to get the materials to make all of the different things. The drama department we actually went into DC, and we got dashikis and gilets, real African clothing for them to wear. And all of that was taken care of at no cost to us, because we involved all of these people and their parents. And, it was a big deal for the administration. And we actually then performed it on stage. The band played it while the drama students acted it out, while they wore, all of this authentic African clothing. And, we got to highlight the student who wrote the dramatic part behind the piece. So all of those things really, really helped to build not only camaraderie within the group, but it built a system that allowed us to get some things we would have never gotten on our own.
So, Gary, you kind of organically rolled into the next thing I was going to bring up anyway, the next place to look for money. And this one's not for money, but for labor. So there's a lot of behind the scenes things. Prop building is a great one, scenery for those productions. But even organizing the music library, there's a lot of work and time that goes into running a band program. there's a big push in a lot of schools, particularly the high school level, but I'm seeing it a little bit in middle school, and there's even some programs that I think might do this in college as well. There's a big push for volunteerism and vocational, like real world studies, right? There's districts are your larger districts are starting to hire positions that are just for creating real world kind of internship type experiences, right? There's a bunch of scholarships. I'm in Missouri. I actually have a junior in high school. And in Missouri, there's a program for scholarships, and there's a bunch of states that do this, but there's a requirement of something like 50 volunteerism hours. And a lot of it's some of it has to be for tutoring, some of it has to be for whatever. If you can find out who's in charge of that program in your school, in your district, if you have one, you can very easily create a formal volunteer, a band intern position in a high school to help you do a lot of these things. And that student's getting a great benefit for it because they're fulfilling their volunteer hours, which is going to qualify them for a scholarship or for another program, or those. I'm seeing those on the rise in like all over the country in public schools. So take advantage of that. Start asking some questions, because you could get, instead of, you can get some free labor out of that will save you all kinds of money.
Yeah. There is another thing very similar to Title I in terms of money that's available to schools that most people don't know about, and it's called ESSA. It's Every Student Succeeds Act, and in that act, it actually goes through Arts for Education, or Assistance for Arts Education. It's the same kind of deal. You have to be able to show that it's going to advance student achievement. Again, they encourage you to get in touch with the school improvement people and become a part of that plan. But you can get money. There's money earmarked for the arts, specifically for the arts, in that. It's called Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, and you can find money there as well.
Yeah, I love it. This is good. So see, Paul, you're doing exactly what you said you were going to do, which is we're finding money in the couch, right? In the couch cushions, because these are places that most band directors would never think to look. And Gary, if I'm not wrong, sometimes I feel like I don't have the bandwidth to do this, but I've got some band parent or somebody on my staff that I can say, hey man, can you look up this act thing that Gary was talking about and let somebody else help me make that happen? Again, we're talking about delegating, everybody.
Right.
Using all your resources.
Right. Well, yeah, and same thing with grants, because most school systems have a grant writer. So you go to the grant writer and you say, here's my needs. Are the grants out there available? And then have them, create that grant for you so that you don't have to do the legwork on all of that. Although I understand it's much easier to do in the digital age than it used to be. But still, most band directors are so busy doing the day-to-day kinds of things that they have to do that they never think about grants. And if they can get the grant, typically it's like a year removed. So I apply for the grant this year, but I get it next year, kind of thing. But still, there's an opportunity there. The other one that I heard recently about working with a school as part of my role in LCL was it was a Title I school, and the principal said to me that at football games they get so few people that they can't even afford to pay the referees, all of the officials for the game. And I said, well, my goodness, how do you pay them then? And he said, well, I have learned to find out who all the movers and shakers are in the community. And he said, I meet them and I talk to them. And he said, I might say to them, hey, we could really use some help with buying, say, color guard uniforms. And he said, a lot of times these people who are looking to donate money for different reasons will say to them, okay, how much do you need? And they'll just write you a check. And as I was thinking about that, in the community that I live in, there's a very large trucking firm that also owns lots and lots of property in the area, that if I were still teaching, I would be doing that. I would be going to those people and saying, hey, here's my need. Can you help me out here? In fact, interesting story. I had a chance with my jazz program. We used to host a festival, and we had a chance to bring the Yellow Jackets, Bob Minster and the Yellow Jackets, to our little tiny school. And it was a lot of money. And on my trip home from school one day, I stopped at 4 places people that I knew in our community that were movers and shakers, and I had half of the amount of money that I needed to pay to cover the cost for them, and I live 5 miles from my school. So it's not that hard. If you know the people to talk to, and you're willing to reach out, there are people out there who are willing to help.
Gary, I feel like this is like a regular Leaders Creating Leaders meeting because you just read my mind on 2 topics right in a row, which I love. One thing I just want to reinforce: there are a lot of grants out there. Band directors, unless you really, really want to, and it sounds like a ton of fun, do not become a grant writer. Find somebody to help you with that, because what I have found over the years is grant writing is kind of a specialized. It's not necessarily a specialized skill, but there's a certain personalities who will do really, really well there, and and it's right in place to their strengths. And you probably have at least 1 or 2 of those in your band parent group, if not more. So again, this is about asking and just asking for somebody to volunteer, and maybe asking 2 or 3 times, and then a lot of times, just not to play on stereotypes, but a lot of times the people who are really good at going through that paperwork are also not necessarily the first ones to raise their hand in a meeting and want to volunteer. So a lot of this is also just getting to know the parents, and getting to know the students. And the other thing that Gary had mentioned that I want to highlight, Gary had mentioned that donation for the band program going through the paying for the referees. That was a Title I school, which typically means that's an economically depressed area, right? There's probably better language for that, but it's an area that just doesn't have a very large property tax base, which is how a lot of U.S. schools are paid for primarily. I want to highlight this, and this is going to be we might get a little hate for this. If you don't have like an Amazon Classroom wish list or something on Donors Choose, or some other place to send people that want to help your program that can do that, where it makes it very easy for them to just say, yeah, you know what, I'll help out a little bit here. I think you're missing an opportunity, right? And again, this is more like pennies in the couch cushion in comparison to some of the other things we've been talking about, but it adds up and it matters. And I know there's a big swath of people who heard that and said, well, my program is in an area where nobody has any extra money. And, something that I have learned in the last 5 years or so, I've been doing some real estate investing and talking to a lot of people and visiting a lot of different areas on the socioeconomic ladder. And I will tell you, I have been very surprised about like those stereotypes don't apply everywhere, right? There are a lot of people in very affluent areas who don't have an extra penny, and they are in debt up to their eyeballs, and they cannot afford to help you with $20. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people living in a very small house by American standards in an area that maybe you wouldn't want to live in, who are millionaires and would love to help. So do not I guess what I'm saying is, ask anyway, right? Find the right language to ask in a way that's sensitive to your audience, but have those things out there and have different ways for people to help. Because I'll also say this: when somebody helps 1 year, they are more likely to help in year 2 or year 3 or year 4, right? And in band, we typically have students for all 4 years of a high school, or 2 to 3 years if you got a junior high or a middle school. And if you've got a kind of a joint program, you might have the same students going through a program for 7 years, middle school to high school. And when those band parents finally graduate, like, it's emotional for them because they have such ties to the program. So the earlier you can get somebody to help and make it part of the culture that, hey, if you have a little extra to give, let's help somebody who doesn't, right? I know, Tim, in podcasts in the past, I've talked about setting up if not a full scholarship program for band fees for high school programs that have band fees, at least having a checkbox if you're doing it digitally that says, would you like to donate an extra $10, $50, $100 to help somebody else offset their band fees, right? Things like that, right? This can become a part of the culture, even if you're in an area where you don't think anybody has 2 pennies to rub together. And you're probably right that most don't, but you're wrong. There are some, and they want to help, and maybe they don't want it very public that they're helping. So create a way where somebody can privately donate. I think that's another way of asking that a lot of people won't do, and they'll talk themselves out of. So even if you don't have a lot of things to put on an Amazon wish list, I say, dude, put something on there just to help create that culture and build some momentum towards giving and donation and supporting your program.
Yeah, and we mentioned the Paying for Drum Corps course that is available for anybody. And I remember one of the things you said in there is, ask Aunt Sue and Uncle Ken and your grandma, and like, hey guys, can you like these are people that support you. Like, here I am, a kid, I'm in the band, and all my relatives and friends of the family and everybody, like, they're all cheering me on. So if there's a way for you to say, hey guys, if you want to support us, we're trying to make that trip to the blah blah blah. Can you go here and make a donation, or can you go to Amazon? Like, people will do that.
Yeah, but you have to ask.
You have to ask, and I would say this. I personally have a preference, if you can find the right way to ask. I personally have a preference of just straight asking for money as opposed to selling chocolate bars as a fundraiser, right? Like, I have a rule: if there's a kid that comes to my door to door, I'm going to buy something, right? Just to reward them for door to door. But oftentimes, if it's something that I don't want, I'll ask them, can I just give a donation? Because I don't want to buy something that I'm not going to use. Now, maybe that kid would prefer I buy it because there's a contest on who sells the most. But as far as if it's a program that you want to help, just giving somebody a $20 bill, more of that money goes to the program than buying $20 worth of whatever, right? Because only then a small percentage goes there. So again, for me, I'm a big fan of finding ways to direct ask your base, right? You have a base of people that want to support your program. And if they feel good about giving your program $20, awesome. See if you can get all of that $20 instead of getting them, popcorn or, I always go back to Girl Scout cookies, right? Like,
yeah,
the Girl Scouts
I've certainly
make a
bought a lot
good
of Girl
percentage
Scouts.
for retail, but it's a terrible percentage from a donation standpoint.
Yeah, I probably should have done that for my waistline recently, just made the donation. But
Thin mints. It's Thin Mints for me.
Yeah,
but I have done that
how many
before.
candles can you buy? You got candles lined up the whole way across your room. We found years ago that the best way to do fundraisers was to make sure you're buying something that people are going to buy anyway. So, for example, we went to a local meat market or meat shop, and we sold whole hog sausage. And so then we took orders for whole hog sausage, and people bought that. And once we knew how many people were buying, then we had the hog butchered, and then we were able to bring them, what they purchased. And it was something that they were going to buy anyway, as opposed to a candle that I didn't need, or another bag of popcorn that I didn't need. So finding something that people are typically going to go and buy anyway is a much better way to go about fundraising.
There's a local band program in my area that does a mattress sale fundraiser every year. Right? How often do people change their mattress? And the great thing about that is you're using your skill set, right? You've got some band dads. They bring the band trailer, or this school, I think, has a box truck. We'll have band dads in a box truck and a bunch of band kids. If you got a kid that can march a sousaphone, he can probably, that in base 5, they can probably move a bunch of mattresses in an afternoon. So, and like you said, it's something you're going to buy anyway. And that definitely got more people to support the program than normally would have. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I remember having some band kids come to my door raising money to take the band to Ireland, and I just gave them a 20, like, go to Ireland on, here's 20. Like, I don't know what that's going to do, but I was happy to do that, especially when they showed up in their band uniform. And I was like, damn, this is making an impression on me. Because I'm with you, Paul. Like, I'm always going to stop at that lemonade stand. And if anybody comes to my door, I did that myself too many times. So everybody, there's lots of examples here. By the way, if anybody ever wants to go to Ireland, let me know. My friend Keith Kelly does Ireland trips. And that's a great trip. So be in touch with me if you're trying to get your band to Ireland. I'll set you up with that. Anyway, Paul, we've discussed a lot of great ideas, all things that probably people haven't thought about. So I think this was very helpful. Was there anything we missed that you wanted to mention before we wrap this up?
We could go on for hours. I feel like we hit a lot of the broad strokes, and if, hopefully something inspired you to maybe, wasn't on our list. Hopefully just the thought process of going through just some different places to look. Hopefully that inspired you to just ask some more questions and have some more conversations. And typically, if you find money year one. A lot of these things can be repeated for year 2 and 3. So think of this as a long process, right? If you're trying to do a 5-year, 10-year process to build a program, this is just another part of that, another aspect of it. So good luck.
Yeah.
Happy hunting.
I love it. Gary, what would you say in closing? What would you like to remind people of?
I'd like to remind people that first of all, they must ask. And second of all, when they ask, they need to make sure that they're framing it in a way that people understand that this is going for student enrichment, student achievement. We're doing this so that the students have an opportunity to grow and learn. That's the purpose of it all. It's not really about that trip to Ireland. It's about all of the things that happen in the course of the preparation and the journey that it's about. So recognizing that and making sure then whenever they go to people and asking for money at whatever level, it's really about what's best for the kids.
Yeah, I love it. This has been great, guys. So Paul and Gary, thank you so much for talking with me. This was really, really productive, helpful conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.